I'm Bob Perkowitz, ecoAmerica's president. I'm coming to you from the neighboring, the Piscataway lands in Washington, D.C. I am your host, and thank you again for joining. Today, we're going to highlight the work of two of our Climate Leadership Award finalists. The American Climate Leadership Awards recognizes and rewards climate leaders and organizations that are building political resolve for effective climate action at local, regional, and national levels. Joining me from Youth versus Apocalypse on the West Coast are Aniya Butler, Hip Hop and Climate Justice Coordinator, and Estrada, the Education and Organizing Manager. And then from the City of Ann Arbor, we have the Sustainability and Innovations Manager, Dr. Missy Stults. You guys have all done some very impressive work, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. So let's get to this. First of all, I got to thank you for applying to the American Climate Leadership Awards. I know it's a slightly arduous process, but you read through the replication guides, which they'll put in the chat box of what you're doing, and it's astonishing how you just go from thought to program to effectiveness at pretty rapid speeds. So I just wanted to stop and ask about the American Climate Leadership Awards process. Do you have recommendations for other groups who might want to apply or anything about how to improve it? Missy, let's start with you.
Sure. I think especially for government folk, we're not very good at telling our story. And so one of the nice things about the ACLA was a kind of respite to take a step back and take stock of what we were doing and be able to tell that story. And so I know that's not something that's particularly common or that we build into our work plans, but it's also really important. And it's really helpful to perhaps see the ecosystem because you get so invested in a piece of that ecosystem. So I found the process to be actually really releasing and rejuvenating to kind of look back and be like, oh, okay, we are making progress. We are doing things. So I was appreciative for the opportunity and hope others take advantage of it.
Okay, I was, like I say, the thing that we'll get back to in a moment is just the astonishing speed that you went from idea to program to engaging so much of your community. I haven't seen anything move that quickly or comprehensively. Let's go to Hannah or Aniya, either one of you. What did you think about the ACLA process?
I've really enjoyed it, or I really enjoyed it. We've done more than a few grants, especially the people who worked on this one, and we've never had a grant ask us to create a replication guide. I think this work can be really intimidating when you're a young person or you're starting off by yourself in your community, or maybe you only have like 2 other people down to do this type of work with you. So thinking about how we could make our replication guide easier to follow for young people in different areas was really fun. And I think it was also a really nice change of pace for us we also got to kind of like look back and realize how far we had come and see that we had made a lot of improvement and accomplishments, and just we had a really organic start. So it was really cool to think about how that organic start could also be duplicated in other places in different circumstances. So I really enjoyed it.
Right. Well, your story about a group of students and one teacher, playing a major role in stopping a huge coal terminal in Oakland is amazing. And everybody who's listening in the chat window, there is a replication guide that has all the steps that they did, and it's super inspiring work. But I was just curious about when you're setting it up here, what was the magic secret sauce that enabled you to go from one teacher and a few students to the bigger organization and the effectiveness that you had? How did you do that?
Yes, it was just a lot of outreach and going out there and just recognizing who we want who we want on the front lines, which are youth and, youth of color. And so, just going to different schools, leading different type of workshops and presentations, getting students involved, and really just trying, because I feel like the climate justice movement can sometimes be like really draining. and it can be intimidating to youth. So like making it accessible to, youth in schools and youth from Oakland and the Bay Area. So really, just going out there and talking to our peers because we're all students, and just trying to get people involved and everything like that.
Was it easy or hard, Aniya?
Um, I don't think it was easy, but it wasn't hard either. I feel like it's right in the middle. You have, challenges because you're trying to make such a broad movement, accessible to a lot of different people who have been so long been shut out of the movement. And so really, I think the main hard thing was about it was, fighting against these systems that, are trying to keep us out of this movement, and really just finding a way to get, all different types of youth with all different types of passions and love for involved in the movement, and just really finding their place. And then also recognizing that, these aren't, you know, these are our peers. These are people we work with and see with, and like generally like go to school with and grow up with. So just figuring out different ways to, help get youth involved. But I don't think it was hard or easy. I think it was right in the middle.
Okay. Missy, as you've heard me say 3 or 4 times before, astonishing how you started in 2019, build up, I don't know, 70, 80 organizations and came up with a super comprehensive plan for your community. And why don't you share a little bit of insights about, just tell us about the A to Zero program and how you got that thing going.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. So A20 is our community's plan, program, and all of the initiatives to achieve a just and equitable transition to decarbonization by 2030, community-wide. So every household, University of Michigan, our commercial enterprises, city operations, right? So that's overwhelming and daunting, and we often describe it as absolutely audacious, but essential, right? When we look at the climate crisis that we're facing. And so if you're going to do something audacious, you have to jump in. And I think our youth leaders demonstrated that better than anyone else in this movement. You just challenge the system, right? So what we did, our community, our city council passed a climate emergency declaration in November of 2019. They set a goal of being carbon neutral community-wide by 2030. And they said, oh, by the way, you have to give us a plan in the next 4 months for how we're going to do that. And so we said, okay, I mean, there were a little bit of tears for a moment, a little bit of overwhelmingness, and then you just like got in and you got to work. And so in 82 working days, we held 68 public meetings. We had 80 scheduled, 12 got canceled due to the pandemic. We recruited collaborating organizations. We stood up technical advisory committees, which were people in our community, of our community. And we looked at what was technically necessary, what was politically possible, what was socially acceptable. And we created a living plan. It's wrong. Things will change, right? It's just the truth. And so planning isn't fact, planning is directional. And that was really liberating to kind of create the plan itself, which we are actively implementing. And so the plan was adopted. There's a governance structure, there's an investment scenario, there's a prioritization framework, so other things can be evaluated rigorously when they come into the process. And I'm happy to say today we have 95 collaborating organizations. And we went from 70 at the time of adoption to continuing to grow. So it's a grandiose adventure over here in Ann Arbor.
Aniya, Hannah, the Youth versus the Apocalypse, there's a bunch of youth groups out there working on climate change. And it's astonishing for me to see that they're mostly high school students. High school students are leading the way versus college students. In my era, the high school students weren't engaged in that way. How did you guys up the level of sophistication or get the motivation? How come it's you leading college students instead of the other way around?
I can start, and then Hannah, please feel free to add anything on. I think it's just because this is our future, and this is something we, try to emphasize when, trying to get youth involved in the movement, that we are the ones who will be, facing the consequences of the climate crisis. And, a lot of the world is already seeing the consequences of the climate crisis. And so really just saying like, this is our future and we have basically 2 choices: to act against it or to not. Most youth are going to want to act against it. So I think that's why it's, high school students. I also think, my group, this generation is just really eager to, take action. I think we've done, amazing work around really all types of justice movements. So I really think it's just also we're just trying to, rebuild a society, because that's what the climate justice movement is about. Rebuilding a society with new foundations of sustainability and equity, so we can, create a world where really every person is allowed to thrive. So I think it's our future, but it's also the future of our descendants and who's coming after us.
Is there things that you guys have that you think are different from other youth climate movements? What distinguishes you guys?
I can answer that one. I feel like one of the most unique things about Youth versus Apocalypse is, one, that the youth leading our group are frontline youth. So when we are engaging other frontline youth, I do feel like we're able to connect in a more organic way. And two is that we don't focus solely on the climate. We focus on the intersections of the climate crisis and other injustices within our communities. And I feel like that intersection has been a really motivating factor for a lot of our young people and engaging a lot of our young people. And I do notice that the climate movement can be a little Caucasian sometimes and a little inaccessible for frontline people. And so Youth versus Apocalypse has been really focused on making sure that our frontline young people know that there is a place for them in the movement, and that they don't need permission from other groups of people to be leaders and to organize and do the work that they do. So I feel like that has really made us have a little bit of, just made us a little bit more unique than some of the other groups that I've noticed.
Well, I can't agree with you more about the racial thing. It's just amazing to me to see African American women leading movements all across the United States of America, and to see youth. So, and are you part of Future Coalition or?
No, sorry.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm in a little section here that I'm calling like collaboration in my notes, like how people work with other people. And let me just go back to Missy. Was your community ready for you? I mean, had things changed because of you, or were they just sitting there and you just said, "Hey, join," and they said, "Sure"?
That's such a hard question to answer. Were they ready? I don't know how they would answer that. What I would say is I happen to be on the Anishinaabe land in what is now Ann Arbor, and there is a lot of pride and personal identity associated with environmental action. And so that was an opportunity. That was a gateway to have these conversations. But if we're really honest about what those conversations look like, there's a whole lot of systemic and institutional racism that are embedded in those conversations. And that's a really tough thing. And I'm going to just put one on the table, which is property rights and our history and legacy around redlining and home ownership and single family zoning, and who accumulates wealth in that way, and the audacity to think that any of us could ever actually own property. Like there's a whole bunch that's enmeshed in that system. And for us, that was actually the most complicated discussion. And it still continues to be the most complicated discussion about density and development, and who gets to be here and who gains the privilege of having access to all of these things. And perhaps we can reframe it, who doesn't? And so that's a really important part of this work, and the most uncomfortable part of this work, I would say, probably for the community, is that portion.
I don't want to go off too much track here. One of the attendees just typed in land back, yes. And, the whole idea of reparations, I think, is one of the big flashpoints between people right now who are trying to solve these issues. I look at democracy, racism, and climate as the same thing. And we basically got to solve all three things, or we're not going to solve any of them. And it's nice to see the great momentum that we have and encourage it and support it. But so going back to YVA, you guys have mentioned in the replication guide being parts of other coalitions. Did you join them? Did they join you? How does that work?
I think it was a little bit of both. We did a lot of, when we started organizing bigger actions, we had a lot of youth from just different areas of the Bay Area. And so it never felt right to have the actions be organized solely by us. And we felt like it's needed to have other perspectives and other groups be involved. And so there was a lot of us reaching out to them, and then there was also a lot of other people reaching out to us. And we just tried our best to have like a unifying front in the Bay when we were doing these types of actions. So I think it was a little bit of like both of like us joining other people's groups and trying to be involved with them, and them also sending their young people and adult allies to be involved with us.
The both of your organizations are in relatively progressive areas, right? Oakland, Berkeley, and then even Ann Arbor, you know, the university and everything that's out there. Do you think that that's a special part of your success, or, you know, how would we move this to, you know, 30 miles east, Hannah and I, where you guys are, you know, just go across those little foothills into the valley and stuff. You know, is there any chance for places like that? Or why don't we do Missy first, and let's see about how replicable this really is.
Yeah, I have two answers, one based on kind of my experience in Ann Arbor, and then one based on previous. So I didn't always work for the city of Ann Arbor. I've only been here 3 years, and my previous life was working with lots of local governments for a nonprofit called ICLEI. And we worked in all places, you know, really conservative places, really liberal places, places that are faux liberal, you know, kind of the whole landscape. And the path looks different, but there is incredible action still happening. So some may lead with climate mitigation and efforts to clean our grid or to focus on transit-oriented development, and others may lead with resilience. And the fact that we can't flood anymore, and who are our fence line and frontline populations that are disproportionately burdened by impact. And so I don't know that it matters what your gateway is into this work. I think it matters that you're in this work. And if the moment in time that we're in has taught us anything, it is that climate change is here. And this is not a future problem. We are living it every minute of every day. Our skies are on fire, our ground is burning, our roads are flooding, our seas are rising, so are we. This is the moment to take action. So I think that it's just not cookie cutter, but there's space for everyone in the movement, and we are seeing people step up in the movement. And that's why I'm a localist, because that's where the impacts are felt. From the Ann Arbor perspective, I think what we're doing, if you look at one of the principles and values we hold, it's replicability and scalability. So I don't ever want to embrace the solution that only we can do. That doesn't help. Climate's not going to come through, like a storm's not going to be like, oh, good job, Ann Arbor, let me just leapfrog over you and hit Ypsilanti. Like, that's just not real. And so we are a higher impact, higher capacity community, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we find pathways that are scalable and transferable throughout the state, the region, and the country.
Okay, so youth versus apocalypse, you know, taking the youth movement out into the red areas of the state or around the country, is that something you think that's practical and doable, or do you need a progressive community with a lot of frontline people that are energized to make it happen?
I can say a little to this. I think for sure, part of the climate justice movement is literally saving the planet. And I think everyone is down to do that. So it's just really looking what we're trying to do really is, mitigate climate change, but also, create a world where people are allowed to be, really be free. So I think it for sure, I don't think it's a matter of being replicable. I think it's just, getting people involved. I think, these like the Bay Area, I think we've had a lot of progress in climate justice movement just because of our culture, Bay culture. And we're also, we're really diverse. We're full of a lot of different people. And we're also, an area where we're facing a lot of environmental racism, and where, California in general is just seeing a lot of the effects of the climate crisis. Not as worse as others, but we're seeing some of them. So yeah, I think it's just more of so getting people involved and just educating yourself about how you're affected by the climate crisis. Everyone is affected differently, so just learning more about it. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I'd love to just add in real quick, because I definitely feel like it doesn't matter where you're at. It just matters that you're getting, like Aniya said, getting people involved. But I do just want to remind everyone, because I did hear Missy talk about how like we're living the climate crisis right now. We're seeing it every day, and I feel really called to just remind people that communities of color have been seeing it for generations. We have been seeing it for literally like our grandparents and great grandparents and our ancestors. I went to school with kids whose grandparents had died from cancer from the radiations in their communities. And so I just want to like remind people of that, because for us, you know, a lot of people in the Bay Area, they recognize that we're in a climate crisis. They recognize that we have a big chaotic thing going on, but they refuse to recognize the damage and the violence that has been done to our communities through pollution for years. And it's kind of left out of the narrative and the talk when we discuss these things. So I just want to remind everyone of that, and really give respect and honor to the people that came before us, because I think young people being involved in climate isn't a new thing. And I think people of color leading these types of things is not a new thing. Indigenous people have been leading those paths for forever. So I really want to just pay respect to them and also remind everyone that this isn't new for us. It may be new for you, but it is not new for us.
You know, the other thing that you guys bring to the party is, you know, effective activism. I'm pretty familiar with the AME Church, and we work with them on their climate program, and we learn so much from them because they have been fighting the struggle and they have been winning, not as enough and not fast enough, but they have been making a huge amount of progress over the years. And so, you know, it's just great to be allied with these different groups trying to work toward the same thing. But your comment about, you know, people don't understand that, you know, they've been, you know, certain groups of people have been living next to the expressways, next to the chemical plants, next to the refineries, next to all the other stuff. And, you know, you can just see it in all the health statistics that it's just not fair. But everybody in America, if you ask them, literally 95% plus says we all deserve the same clean air, we all deserve the same clean water. They just don't do it. They don't pass the legislation and do the things to make it happen. But, you know, one thing in your replication guide you mentioned, and I might be misinterpreting this a little bit, but it was kind of delicate that you didn't just come out there as like Missy was A20 Ann Arbor. I mean, there's no wiggle room there. You know what's going on. And Youth versus the Apocalypse, you know, spectacular, relevant name, but it seemed like you were a little bit delicate in coming out with aggressive climate stuff. And maybe is that because of engaging your peers, or do I have that wrong?
I feel like you kind of got it spot on. I think as a young person growing up in a frontline community, or just as a young person growing up with less access to certain resources than, say, my other peers in San Francisco, when we're approaching our young people, or we're, you know, like giving them this guide, we don't want it to be a thing where it's like it's so intimidating and there are so many things they need to Google and look up, and that they can't understand, that they just go, I'm not even going to start. And so part of it is like, we want to make sure our young people don't need to have 24 lists of words that they need to figure out what they mean to start. Like, you don't have to be somebody with a PhD or somebody who has been trained to do this work to do it, because your perspective and your background that's your permission. Like, that's your ticket to start right there. So we wanted to make that clear of like, I think that once you get started, it is easier to dive into those things. But when you're first starting, like, it doesn't have to be the most complicated, complex, here are 24 pieces of legislation that I need you to read and tell me what they mean for you to start organizing. So it was definitely purposeful.
Missy, in all your work, how are you engaging youth, or how are they engaging you?
A multitude of ways. I mean, everyone, like, this is an all hands on deck kind of moment and movement. So let's see, youth are, there are key organizers around much of the movement. They are our ambassadors. We have a formal A20 ambassador program in which it's all ages, all races, all demographics, all socioeconomic status is represented. But youth are really a lot of the leaders of that movement. We have requirements for youth seats on commissions that we've changed because we were missing really important critical voices in governance and decision-making. Oh, man, I don't know, like, there's our energy, there are passion, I don't even think I can answer it articulately.
Yeah, I mean, besides at the university or beyond, are there youth climate groups in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say I could probably pull the numbers, but at least 20% of our collaborator network or youth-led networks, whether that's the Sunrise Movement, whether that's through Ann Arbor Public Schools, we have our youth commissions there. We've got an environmental education center that got youth from the schools. Of course, the University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan University are really active in the movement in lots of different ways.
And again, I'm fascinated by the boldness of your name, A20, and then we know it's 2030, spectacular, that kind of, if everybody did that, we would save the world, right? And the fact that they're not doing it is why we have these huge problems. But so are you going to make it?
Is there an option not to?
Wow.
Yeah, no, that's just what I keep hardening myself with all the time. Yeah, we're going to make it. We're going to find a way to make it. And, offsets are a part of our equation, and I hope they're a really small part of the equation. But there are things like we're not going to have all the internal combustion engines off the road. They're not affordable. They're not accessible for everybody. Like, that's not realistic. But we've been working on regulatory interventions to make sure our offsets are local and that they're helping do things that are probably way too technical to go over on this call, but to make sure they're making investments here in Michigan, in our environmental justice communities, to actually make life better instead of going out to the open market and buying RECs. So we're trying to, I can't remember if it was Hannah or Aniya that said this, but we're trying to change the system. And I think that's what I was sort of getting at more broadly, is that you didn't ask this, but I'm going to share this. A pet peeve I have in this movement is a whole lot of people blaming. Right? Like, if only you did this thing, and if only you put solar on your roof, and only if you stop buying things and stop, right? The system is broken. The entire structure in which we're operating is the problem. And so I really try to think about how we change the system and change the institutions in the game, because we're not going to win the game if we play by those rules. So let's change the system. I just wanted to share that broadly.
As you become more successful, or probably right now today, or maybe even a year ago, you have examples to share with communities all over the place. You got a big problem because right next to you is this little place called Detroit, which has built all those cars that are causing the problems that we have. How are you sharing what you're doing with other communities or pushing the communities around you? Because you're just Ann Arbor. It's really cool, but we need you to go big.
Yeah, we're deeply connected. We're connected both within Michigan with our regions. I work closely with the sustainability director in Detroit, in Grand Rapids as well. Like, we tend to look more alike in terms of the things that we can do and the influence we have. And then you challenge the system, whether that's by, I talk to the OEMs. We call them and we're like, guess what? I'll move electric vehicles for you. We'll start a bulk discount program. And their response at one point was, we can't move vehicles fast enough for you, so please don't do that. We're like, well, then get going, right? Like, pick up the speed here. I'll help you move market. Or it's intervening in rate cases to change the entire utility structure in Michigan. And that's sort of one of the things I see that's problematic. And in that case, we are higher capacity, right? I have staff, which many places don't. And so we can do the intervention, but gather feedback from our peers in the utility district to say, what are your pain points? Highland Park, what are you struggling with utility? Can we go ahead and add that to our intervention and be a united front? So yes, we'll pay the intervention costs, but we're actually talking as a collective. And that carries a lot more weight in those kinds of proceedings.
And Hannah, a double question here. One thing is, how could you be more effective in your work? And the second question is, how can other people help you be more effective? Come on, ladies. You guys have been going back and forth so smoothly. Let's keep it going. Let me help. Hannah, why don't you do the how can you be more effective? And then Aniya, why don't you do the thing about, how can we help you? Because the way to help you is to give you things that you think you want and need, not for other people to give you things that they think you need and want. So how can you be more effective? Mm-hmm. How can we help?
This is hard, especially because YVA has grown so much over the past 3 years that we've a lot of different challenges have come up that we really never saw coming. So there's a lot of like little things within organizing that we've noticed, like, okay, maybe this is something we want to change. But I think one way we could definitely be more effective is really being able to like provide and support our youth in more concrete ways. I think one of the ways we are supporting our youth are obviously through like creating the space for them to organize and just being like the people in the background for like moral support. But I think it also comes down to like a lot of our young people need rides. A lot of our young people need like Wi-Fi and laptops or internet connection to get on meetings. A lot of our young people are live in food deserts and don't have time to organize because they're working jobs because they're worried about what they're going to eat and what their little siblings are going to eat. So some of it is more concrete things of like, we need to take the worries away from a lot of our frontline youth for them to fully be able to give themselves to this type of work. And right now, that's just not something that we're able to do because there's so many of us that are struggling in the Bay, especially with prices rising, and it's becoming very difficult for our young people to stay involved long term because different things arise within their lives that they have no control over. So I think finding a way for us to really provide concrete support and provide things consistently like bus tickets and meals and internet connection and laptops and like therapy and that type of stuff, I think would be really amazing and make our work 10 times more effective.
You're referring to what I would refer to as infrastructure, the basic things like how do you bring people together, how do you communicate, how do you support people? That's fantastic. And if you put a little bit of more thought and you can write down like these are the 3 best ways to do it, I'd be glad to have us all work on trying to support that. But Aniya, you want the second part of that question?
Yes.
I think we just mixed them together. So how can you be more effective and how can we help? But go ahead.
Yes. When you say we, do you mean like adults or just people in general?
I mean the communities out there that have wealth and power, the foundations, the big environmental groups, the other people that are trying to, that always talk about doing good stuff and then you question. And I think a lot of times they don't know what to do. They do. Like, I'm not going to mention any foundations, but, they make their plans and they say, this is what those people need. And then they give those people, and then they go back 5 years later and say, hey, it didn't quite work out the way we wanted to. I don't know that we talk to each other enough. The people that all have the same values and all the same, they just don't get it. So, so I'm asking you, what do you need? Because I'll work on that, right?
Yes, I think the first thing is to check and recognize your privilege and to check where you stand and to understand how the climate crisis is affecting you. I feel like at this point we're all being affected, but some people are, going under the worst effects. I'm sorry, one second, I'm gonna close the door.
Go ahead, Hannah. I feel you. I feel the teamwork here.
I know. Okay, Aniya, you good?
Yes, I'm sorry. My brother's girlfriend speaks loudly sometimes. But yes, I was just saying, first of all, check your privilege and check where you stand in the climate crisis and to see how you can use that privilege to create a platform for frontline communities to speak and to do this organizing work. Because in order for the climate justice movement to be about climate justice and to really be true, frontline communities have to be the spearheaders of this movement. And so to really, use whatever, privilege and position that you have in society and use that to uplift, communities instead of speaking for them. I feel like there's a really, thing where you feel like you have to speak for these marginalized communities, but I feel like it's the point where we need to be speaking for ourselves because we are the only ones who will be able to articulate what we need the best because we're the ones who are, undergoing these detrimental effects of the climate crisis. So I think that's really like the main thing you can do is really, check your privilege and check where you stand and to use that to uplift other communities and, to help them out. But yeah.
Missy, your support, is it all public from the Ann Arbor government or do you get funds from anywhere else for your work?
Financially?
Pardon me?
You meant financially, not like human
Yes,
capital,
financially.
right? Yeah. Most of it comes from the government in terms of the taxpayers. Thank you all very much. But we do also seek philanthropic dollars, federal support, all of the above approach. We don't stop.
What percentage is local? I mean, government.
It's an interesting question, and it changes because this is our first year with a really significant budget for climate work. So if I mean, in our fiscal year started July 1st. So it's sort of like I'm right on the cusp of that. Or I would say last year, 65, 70% was local. This year, 80, 85% is local funding.
Wow. Okay, and then, Hannah and Aniya, do you get funding from foundations, or where does your support come from?
Yeah, we definitely get funding from foundations. Our young people also do a lot of fundraising for certain things. Like there are a lot of little costs that we accumulate when we're doing like strikes and actions that we didn't, like porta potties or like school buses to have kids on, or snacks sometimes, or water, like real little things that we don't realize add up fast. So our young people do fundraising, but we also, apply for grants. I don't think that we're getting any support financially from our local governments right now. So yeah, we do get funding from different places.
I'm going to just ask you each one more question and give you a chance to leave whatever thoughts about anything that you want to leave at the end of this. And I'll go back to youth versus the apocalypse again. The 10 to 19-year-old thing, I'm not going to ask you your ages again, but some of you are going to be, is that really a line that, that once you become 19 years old, that you're no longer part of what you just spent the last 5 years working on?
I can say my age. I'm 15. I've been doing climate justice organizing since I was 13. I think it's not really a cutoff. I think another part of the climate justice movement is, passing the torch down to, the next, to other frontline communities. So I feel like, when you become, I guess, 19, you're sort of like an adult, I guess. I would say I guess because I know a lot of 19-year-olds. But I think it's just, you're not necessarily like, oh, I can't be part of the climate justice movement anymore. It's just, you're using the experience and like the work that you've done to help, I guess, guide and advise other youth who are coming into it. So I think it's just really, passing down the torch, but also just helping others, and just, recognizing that. And, you can also get involved in like many other groups. But yeah, I think that's just something that YVA wants to do.
I'm 18. I feel like my opinion differs a little because I am like about to be 19. But I feel like I think YVA is in conversation about pushing that age back a little bit, because I think the older some of our youth get, the more we realize you're still a young person when you're 21 or 20. And you still have the same way that our youth and our teenagers are vulnerable, so are like 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds. I think that just because we send them off to college or to go work at the age of 18 or whatever, like just send them off in general, doesn't mean that they suddenly become like these adults who know how to walk into these spaces and can just magically do it. But I definitely agree that once we are getting a little bit older, we do try to be more of a support system for our other young people rather than be the ones being supported. I've been doing this work since I was like 15. So I feel like I'm able to stand a little bit more on my own two legs and try to hold up my young people than, have someone else hold me up in terms of supporting my work. So yeah.
Well, I wish I was as smart and as active as you guys were when I was your age. It's just unbelievable. The Missy, so Ann Arbor's got a really comprehensive program. It's just really amazing. If somebody else is going to get into it and do stuff, what are the 2 or 3 most critical core things about what you've done that made it happen and are making it successful?
Good question. One, this work moves at the speed of trust. So really making sure you have trust and that you've built collaboration and alliances that are authentic are really, really important. You know, I think Aniya said it, no one knows the experience like the people living that experience, right? Like my experience is real and true. It's just my experience in the space, but that's not the experience of everyone else in the space. And so that's really important. So build trust, build a collaboration network and space to do this work. And this is really hard for governments to do. So I'll go governments with this one, but you've got to be okay with failure. We talk about being failure positive, and by that I don't mean like a bridge isn't going to fail. That's not acceptable, but there isn't a path to this. We haven't done this before, and we will not get it right. And there is a kind of a white dominant narrative in there that like we have to do the right thing in the right way, and that's, you just gotta let that go. Like you gotta drop that and understand that this is about flexibility. This is about transformation. This is about fundamental systems change, and that means there isn't a roadmap. There isn't a bike map. And that's a really hard thing for people to do. But I think you got to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
So you've got your trusting, you've got your fail fasting. Any other advice?
Ooh, another one. Nope, I can't think of one right now, but I will come up with one before we end.
All right. YVA, closing comments.
I think, if you're a young person, to, use your strengths and like whatever you have passion for, and to use that to help you, with, your organizing, your activism, whatever it is you're doing. Because, sometimes this can be a lot of work. And so you really want to find something that you really enjoy doing and sort of, incorporate that with your organizing and with your activism. And then to also take care of yourself. If you're a student, you're a student, bro. Like, be a student. And, we're sort of sacrificing our teenage years to, for this. So I think to just take care of yourself and to know that the pressure is not all on you. There's so many other people doing this work. You have to do every single little thing. And I'm speaking from experience. So that's my piece of advice.
Hannah?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Aniya hit it on the head. Take care of yourself. You really have to maintain your mental health and your physical health to continue to do this work, because this fight is going to be a very long one, and we need as many people as we can for the long haul. You know what I mean? So take care of yourself, and also don't be ashamed to take a break. There will be other people that can pick up your slack. So don't feel like you have to do every single responsibility. Don't be ashamed for saying, I can't do that one right now, and don't beat yourself up for it. It's not on your shoulders purely to do this work. So take care of yourself for sure.
Okay. Let me just say that I am very glad and proud to have been able to get to meet and know all of you together. And it's just, it's inspiring and helpful. This is difficult work. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And you guys give me energy and inspiration to get up in this tough fight every day and try to do what we can in the time we need to do it. And I'll just close with a little quote from a guy by the name of Sir Kenneth Robinson. And he said, what you do for yourself dies with you, but what you do for others lives on forever. And we're talking about those kind of consequences here. So let's carry on in friendship and in mutual support and do our parts to literally save the planet right now. Thank you all for joining. I'm sure there's some official closing comments that they've told me to sing, but I don't have my script open right now. So join us. Look at that. Subscribe to Path to Positive channels, and go to our YouTube channel. You'll see a recording up on this site within 48 hours. And, if there's any way we can collaborate with you, please don't hesitate to contact any of us here at ecoAmerica. Thanks for listening and watching.